While this was warming up, I was going to give you the speech she gave. Do we have some lights? Do you want to see
Yes,
that?
everyone.
Everybody hear me all right?
Is that going to be?
Yep, that's fine. So, let me just talk a little bit about the organization first. We are a non-profit organization, so that's, our aim is not money. And any monies that we do get, we usually spend them out to educate. We give a lot of scholarships away. And anything that we can use to students that are going to go into biology, botany, anything like that. And then, of course, some of our money goes towards helping beekeepers too. So that's really our primary goal, is to see that the honeybee survives here. And as I go through my talk, I'm going to really zero this on the honeybee. There's a lot of bees out there. There's a lot of pollinators out there. I'm going to talk about some of them, but my end result is to get to the honeybee, and then I'm going to discuss the problem with the honeybees. And I'll see you're going to see towards the end of this why the honeybee is so important to what we're doing here. So,
Oh, you're good. Thank you very much.
I hate to do this in front of a flower group. I know all of you people know what pollination is, but it's part of my talk. I just kind of do this, and it's a quick little sample of how pollination works. So in this little slide here, we have an example of the two types of pollination. There's self-pollination and cross-pollination. And what I'm going to really go for here is the cross-pollination, because that's what bees are involved in, is cross-pollination. And there's a huge benefit to this. In self-pollination, diseases tend to be replicated over and over and over, and that's where the botanist steps in, and where they start producing plants that are disease-resistant. The honeybee can actually kind of take care of that, because they're cross-pollinating, and the diseases tend to get cured by the plants themselves. Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this up with the honeybee. It's specifically cross-pollinated, so it goes from a male flower to a female flower by accident. They don't realize they're doing this. Okay, so pollinating agents. And this is a list of all of the pollinating agents. I don't know if you're aware of all of them. I like to throw this up. I usually get a big ooh out of the kids when I talk about this, because you would believe that kangaroos and bats. But they do, simply by rubbing up against another plant or smelling a plant and then going to another one, they pollinate. They drop pollen, gets caught on them, and then it falls off. Basically, that's what the bee is doing. Same thing. But these are all pollinating spiders. Does anybody know spiders? Everybody's seen the spiders in their flowers. Well, as they go from flower to flower, they're pollinating. So now we're going to go to insects that pollinate. Ants, because ants go up, they go after that sweet nectar, and they'll go from flower to flower, and they're pollinating. Again, I want to zero in on the honeybee, right down here, this honeybee, right here. Because by far they're the best at it. And they don't realize they're doing it. They kind of have a symbiotic relationship with flowers. The flowers lure them in. And then the pollen is a sticky substance that adheres to them. And when they go from flower to flower, they're picking it up and they're dropping it off. So believe it or not, the flowers know what they're doing. They're going to the bees. Come on. Come on in. So here's one of our honeybees on a flower. And what the flower does is they hide the nectar down inside, where the bee actually has to crawl down inside to get that nectar. And by doing that, it's passing through a series of pollination on the plant that is sticky, and that pollen's falling off onto the bee. The bee has small little hairs on it, and that pollen gets caught on it. The bee, after a while, they can't even fly. There's so much pollen on them that they can't fly, and they store this pollen on their rear leg. If you look right there, they stop and they clean themselves because they can't fly with the pollen all over their wings and their body, and then they have little hooks and they hook it on their legs. Because they do use pollen, but it's not their primary source. Their source is nectar, and nectar is all sugar. They are carbohydrate machines. That's what they're after. They need carbohydrates for the amount of flying they do. They burn up energy like a marathon runner, and that's primarily what they're after, is the nectar. And then with the nectar, they turn it into honey. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that also. But the pollen is used for their young. That's the protein. So they do store some, they'll bring some pollen back to their hive, they mix it with the nectar or the honey, and they feed it to their young. Because from the time the queen lays an egg till the time it's a viable bee, it's 21 days. So it's like a little baby in a cell crying, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me. And they need both carbohydrates and protein, the larvae, but the bees don't need the protein. So this is our little honeybee here. So that I put this basically up there so that you can recognize it, and you can see that this bee is going after the nectar source. They actually have, they call it a proboscis, but it's a tongue, and it's a hollow tongue. They stick it down in there and they suck the nectar up like in a straw. And then they put it in a gut. They call it a honey gut. And they fill that up. When it's full, they go return back to the hive with it. They consume what they have to, and then they go back with the extra. So here she is again, and the picture right here is the pollen that she stored. And you can see all the hair on her body. You can see how this hair would pick up pollen. There's some pollen right up there. Right up there? When she gets too much, she'll stop and use her legs to clean it all off, and then she hooks it on the back. But she's not out directly. There are some bees that will collect pollen. If they're short on pollen, the hive will send some bees out just to collect pollen. But the primary source, again, is nectar. So, why honeybees? So 1/3 of all of our crops, 1/3 of all of our pollinating crops, that's crops that need to be pollinated, need to be pollinated for our food source. So honeybees are social insects. So when you see the typical hive out here, I don't know how many people have ever seen these little white boxes out there. It ranges anywhere from 40 to 60,000 bees in it. So you can just imagine 40 or 60,000 bees attacking a field. I mean, it has to get pollinated. There's no other way around it. It's like an army attacking a little city. It's bound to get pollinated. And there isn't a more social insect than this one here, other than maybe ants. So with just their sheer numbers, just by their sheer numbers, they're great pollinating agents. And without them, we're really going to be in trouble. We really, really will be in trouble. So here's some of the, this is a government chart, and it's a little hard to understand, but I didn't want to change the numbers for fear that somebody said, oh, I saw that chart somewhere and you changed the numbers around. So I left it just as it was. The government actually hired this Morse and Calderon, their name is down here, to actually go out and do a study on different types of plants, and fruits and vegetables that needed pollination, and how much the bees were really pollinating. So I'm going to take the very first one, because almonds, so if you look up here, almonds. So an almond tree. Its dependency, the D stands for dependency. Its dependency on pollinators is 100%. I know they wrote 1, but it's 100%. So without pollinators, you will not get an almond. So they do no cross-pollination. One tree doesn't get to the other tree. They really rely on some type of insect going to the almond tree and then visiting another almond tree. And if you look at the amount P is proportion of that tree that gets pollinated by honeybees. You see what it is? 100%. So let's just take something that we can go, okay, so we have pumpkins around here. So they are 90% dependent on pollination. So they do 10% of theirs is cross-pollination. In other words, the male flower with the wind or something like that, it will blow over to the next plant and it will pollinate. But let's look at how much the honeybee does. 10%. So they pollinate themselves. And this is an example. So if you just run down the list and you look at the P, you can see how much the honeybee is doing here and where you would be lost. So here's one here, nectarines. They only dependent on 60%, but 80% of it is done by bees. And this is where the farmer comes into play. Because if you had that 60%, we'll say a normal tree would yield you 100 tangerines. But when you throw the honeybee in there, you get 150 tangerines. And pollination is a big business in the honey industry, but that's not where we're at. I'm talking backyard beekeepers. Our bees just go out. We don't put for sale signs on them. That's another whole industry. I don't usually talk about it too much. So here we go. So to emphasize how important these honeybees were, a Whole Food store down in Rhode Island in 2014 pulled everything out of their produce department that honeybees or bees would pollinate, just to see what it would look like in the store. And you can see the number here. They eliminated 237 items, or 52% of their products. So imagine walking into, pick your favorite store, Market Basket, Stop and Shop, and over half the items were missing on the shelf. Just the produce department. That's just the produce department. Because now we know there's other things in cereals, blueberries, and I'm just talking produce. If you want to, you'd be shocked. So what happened? Didn't the truck come today? No, the bees didn't show up. So now let's, a little history about the bees. So bees go back, way back. This is a picture of a pine flow sap that it looks like a bee. It looks like a honeybee. We're pretty sure this is a honeybee that was stuck in this little pine flow sap. And they carbon dated and went back 30, 40 million years ago. So they've been around for a long time, and my point behind this slide is we're killing them off pretty good. They've been here, and we seem to want to make them disappear.
Excuse me.
So the first people that found out about honey and how they could use their honey, they were called honey hunters. And that is because the bees were living up in the trees. They had little holes, and they lived out in the open in the warm weather. Around here, they would live inside the tree because it's a little too cold. And these guys went around looking for bees. And when they came across the bee, they would climb a tree. This is a cave painting. Okay, there was a depiction of a cave painting. He would either climb the tree up, and then you can see he's got a little basket on him here. There's bees flying around, and he would go in and stick his hand in there and clean out all the comb and take out all the honey, because there was no sugar. There was no sugar. There was no such thing as a sweet back then. I know, look at us. Look at me. So, this is too much honey though. So, they call them honey hunters because in going after the honey, they killed all the bees. They would just take their hand and scoop in, and they were really destroying their home. Their babies, they didn't realize it. Well, maybe they did realize it. It was the only way they knew how to get the honey. So we're going to go a little as man got a little bit smarter here, and the bees kept getting harder and harder to find because they were killing them, somebody came up with the bright idea, well, maybe we can coax them into staying into little houses. And along comes the bee hive. And they used to build them out of mud, and some of these are actually tree trunks. They would actually take and cut a tree trunk, and there's the hole for the bees, and then they put a thatch roof on it so that they could go down in there and get the honey. But they were still killing the bees. But that was the first beekeepers. And they still had a problem with killing all these bees, because they didn't know, when they looked down and they looked at all the honey, they couldn't recognize the difference between this is honey and this is what the bees have to survive. So we're going to go into this little biology of the bees. So honeybees, they're not native to around here. All honeybees come from Africa. That's where they originally originated. They're a warm climate insect. But they're very adaptable. So in the 1600s, the settlers brought them over here, again, because there was no sugar. And they were actually brought to Virginia in 1622. And in the world, there's some 20,000 bee species. 4,000 of them are native, because we do have native pollinators here. But again, they can't do the job of our honeybee. Only 28 species are related to our honeybee, the one that we work with. And one of them that's directly related is a local pollinator around here called bombus. Does anybody know what bombus is? Anybody heard the term bombus?
A bumblebee?
Mm-hmm. So our local pollinator is the bumblebee. And that's her right there. Everybody's seen the bumblebee, and I'm sure you're seeing the bumblebees are disappearing too, right? And why do you think there are local pollinators? Take a look at the fur coat on that girl. So here's the problem with bumblebees. I'll give you a little thing on bumblebees. Bumblebees, when it comes to this cold weather, make a new queen. She goes out of the hive, buries herself in the ground or under a stump or something, and she actually has a fluid that can stand being frozen, and she will survive. When the spring comes around, she comes back out of the ground and starts a new colony. Her colony actually dies. Her colony ranges of up to about 300 bees. But they die every winter. Honeybees hibernate. So, first of all, we're talking 300 bumblebees. I'm talking 60,000 honeybees. And honeybees will go from 60,000 to 40,000 during winter to spring. These guys go from 300 to 0.
Okay, if she's all alone, how does she reproduce?
She waits. She's already got sperm in her,
Oh,
okay, before she goes into the ground. And then comes back out and starts laying eggs. So, you will see these guys much later and much earlier, but the numbers aren't there. The numbers are just not there. Our honeybees can't fly under 50 degrees. These girls can fly down to probably somewhere around the real low 40s. They're out now. You're probably seeing them right now. So here's our honeybee, and you can see it, she's loaded with pollen. And on her back leg there, again, is pollen that she's collected. They're all females. Yeah, the males are really lazy. They call them drones. There are a few drones in the hive, upwards of 7%. And they're only used for mating purposes only in case they lose the queen. So out of 60,000 bees, you've got 7% of about 4,000, somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 are men. And all they do is, anybody know the definition of a drone? Drone? D-R-O-N-E. It means layable, because that's exactly what they do. They go for a flight, if they can't find a mate, they come back and they eat more. They go for a flight, they don't find a mate, they come back and they eat more. And that's about it. And then when the winter time comes, this time of the year, all the girls throw them out. We don't need you anymore because you can't make a queen, and they actually push them out. We see them pushing, they won't let them back in, they stopped it then. So much for the men. So okay, so this is our girl. This is what I'm zeroing in on, and it's called Apis mellifera. Like everything else, science has given this nice, great Latin name, and I'm going to explain it to you. So it's the east and western common honeybee, and it stands for Apis being bee, meli being honey, and fera means to bear. So in other words, a bee that bears honey. But they named it wrong because they really don't bear honey. They bear nectar. It's not honey until after they get back to the hive, and now the bees turn into the hive. And they were going to change the name, but everybody says, hey, wait a minute, we like the other name better. So I just thought I'd throw this in here. They really named wrong, but all of us in the bee community, we like that name. And we're going to stay with that one. All right, so then along comes this guy. And I put this up. This Reverend Lorraine Langstroth, 1810 to 1895. He actually went to Yale University, and he was a graduate, he was a minister. And his first congregation was right here in North Andover, Massachusetts. He raised his family, and then I believe he moved out to Deerfield, Massachusetts. Beautiful. But very interesting. I mean, everything I've ever read about him, they said if he was around today, he probably has the ADD. He was obsessed. And guess what he was obsessed with? Honeybees. And he looked at him, and he looked at him, and he looked at him, and he says, I can't believe people are killing bees this way just to get the honey. And he made a very interesting observation. What he found out was the way bees arrange their comb in a natural hive, it's like loaves of bread with a little space in between it. Loaf of bread with a space in between. And he called it bee space. And he says that's where the bees walk to get from comb to comb. And some of the comb is honey, some of the comb are the babies. And if we make little racks and we give them the space in between, we can pull those racks out without killing the little babies and killing the bees. And he invented the modern hive that is still used today. It's called the Langstroth hive. It's every beekeeper knows it. That white box that you see out, it's been modernized a little, but it's called the Langstroth hive. And he has got full credit. You can go to a website out. They just put a plaque out in the western part of the state for him. He finally got notarized for what he did. And every beekeeper uses his hive. So that was his big deal to beekeeping. And we wouldn't have the modern beekeeper where we can go in and actually look at the bees and not hurt them.
What's that here?
We could check them for diseases or anything else and put them right back the way they were. So okay, so now we know the importance of bees, and now we know who invented the modern beehive, and I'm going to take you through a little tour here with this. This would be what would happen if we don't have bees. So 1945, I want you to look at this side right here. Population of the United States, about 132 million people. $4.5 million beehives. These are government statistics. Natural bee loss was 17% back then. And I can tell you today that any beekeeper would love to have 17% loss of their beehives. Today, 319, that's a conservative figure. They're talking like 350, but it's 2014. It's a couple years old. The government's a couple years behind. 319 million people. million hives, 43% loss of bees. And that's a good beekeeper. I know people that are at 100%. So how come you're showing me this? Because we had here 132 million people, we got 3 times as many people we got to feed. We have almost 3 times the amount of bees dying. Remember I showed you those charts back there? We have 3 times as many mouths to feed, and we have 3 times as many bees dying. We can't sustain this. Now, I'm not here to make you cry. I don't want to make anybody cry. I said, you people are the perfect people that I should be giving this talk to. I do a lot of these talks, but this is where it's at. This is where I believe it's at. All right, so we're going to, how come the bees are dying, Glenn? Well, is it the beekeeper? Is it really the beekeeper? And I'm going to go to my favorite person here. Well, I guess I don't have her name on here. Well, Dr. Marla Spivak, the University of Minnesota, has really dedicated her life to bees. And in 2006, there was a phenomenon that come around bees, and they called it colony collapse disorder. So beekeepers were going out, and there were no bees left in the hive. Nothing. 0, 1, 2, 3, and nobody knew why. And the scientific community was asked to help us because we were losing all the pollinators. They didn't have bees to pollinate. We're going out thousands of hives. Some of these professional beekeepers that have 3,000 hives would go out there, and 2,800 of them were gone. And they had no idea why. So the scientific community got involved. They asked the scientific community, there's tons of money put into this. And in 2013 it stopped. And they went, what happened? And they didn't really have the answer. So Marla Spivak says, years ago, the coal miners used to go down and they'd bring a canary with them before they had gas detectors. And when the canary started singing, it stopped singing, you ran out of the coal mine. Well, that's what they think the bees are doing. They stopped singing. Now, we survived, but it's going to come back. It's coming back because they never really discovered the full answer. So she came up with 4 plausible answers, and I'm going to go through each one of them one at a time. So I believe the first one I got up here in red is monoculture. So what's monoculture? This is monoculture. Is that beautiful? Beautiful. Those are almond trees in California. Acres and acres and acres of almond trees. And this is the way we plant today. Another one. So you put a bee in the middle of this. A bee lives around 30 days. 30 to 40 days, an adult bee. And they have nothing to eat but almond nectar. They're going to get sick and die. Because they weren't made to live like that. No more than you were made to just have Milky Ways. Every single day, 3 times a day. How far do you think you'd get before you're at the doctor's office and, got a bellyache I got. They have to have some kind of diversity. But we have to feed 350 million people, and this is what we've gone to. Where are the farms around here anymore? No. When I was a kid growing up, Midwell and Bridgewater, they were nothing but farms. East Bridgewater. They still call themselves a farming community. I don't know why. There's no farms. There's nothing. So we got all these mega farms because we have to produce so much food out in California. It's got to be the perfect atmosphere. They can't afford to lose anything, and they truck all the bees and they stick them in there. And then they truck all the bees down to Florida. And they truck them out to the Midwest, and then it's back to California, Florida, Midwest. And this is what the bees do. And I think they finally reacted. So that's monoculture, and what monoculture is doing. Here's another one, monoculture. Beautiful looking thing. I'd like to be laying on that looking birds go by. Put me in that field, but to a bee, awful. Awful. Number 2, pesticides and herbicides. There is no good herbicide. The bees don't know it's there. They're going to go on it. They're going to carry it back. If it doesn't kill them right away, most herbicides will kill a bee pretty quick. But if it doesn't kill them right away, they're going to bring it back to the colony, not realizing that it's going to kill more bees in the colony. So here's a little thing about pesticides. And I'm knocking the industry. I guess I really should kind of get there. I don't want to be sued. I hope there's nobody here. But everybody remembers DDT, right? DDT, and we found out that the eagles and all that. So they went to the scientific community and they begged them, please, we got to do something else. We've got to have something. They come up with a little product called neonicotinoids. So neo meaning neurological, and nicotinoids meaning tobacco-based. Hope nobody smokes in here. But we all know that smoking is no good. No good. So they use tobacco to neurologically affect these insects. And they told us it won't affect the honeybee. We give such small doses, it's only intended to kill the caterpillar that's on your fruit or vegetable or flower. But guess what? The bees are picking it up and bringing it back to their babies. So it might not kill the adult bee, but they bring it back to the babies. And what it does is, it neurologically affects them like somebody with Alzheimer's. They don't know what to do, and they don't know where they are, and they don't know what their function is. And it's gotten so bad, if you read down the bottom here, European Food Safety Authority stated that neonicotinoids pose an unacceptable high risk to bees, and that the industry-sponsored science upon which regulating agencies claim safety have relied may be flawed, and Europe has banned them. Go into, read the label. It's going to have one of these products in it that are up here. Okay? Just look for those names. If you want to write them down, you'll see them. They're in there. It's a neonicotinoid. There is almost nothing that doesn't have it. BT. Anybody use BT? The problem with BT is it's becoming ineffective because anybody that knows anything that won't use a nicotinoid is using BT. And the insects are winning out, but that will not hurt the bees. But there's very little that won't. So I ask you to ease up on the pesticide. If you have to use them, you have to use them. Excuse me, I'm burping. If you have to use them, use them. Read the label, use them wisely. Most of the time with honeybees, it's never when there's a flower, and it's always at night. Because the bees aren't out at night. Hopefully they don't have a long gestation period. That's what you're looking for, something that dissipates in a few hours. Okay? So that's pesticides. That's a big ticket item here. They're toxins. And we're out there. You think you're killing the caterpillar, you are. You're killing all them baby bees too. You can plant flowers. This lady over here seems to be very wise on flowers. You can plant flowers that will make other insects stay away. Now, granted, there are trees. You've got your little tree, and I don't want my apple tree to be ruined, and I can't stop it. Well, then you spray at night when no apple flowers, when there's no flower on an apple tree. The bee doesn't want that tree after there's no flowers. That's all they're after. So that's the safe zone. Read the labels. Read the labels. Find a guy that's going to spray your trees and ask him, what are you using? Okay, next item. Loss of food source. This is probably our biggest thing. This is our biggest thing in Massachusetts. Pretty self-explanatory. There's one of the farms right over here gone. Wow, that's not the picture, but I threw that picture up there. Bridgewater farm, went to California. That's what's left. Our parking lot. Here's another one. The mega farmers are putting the little guy out of business. So what's the point? Support your local farm. If there's any left, support them. Go down and buy something from them. Help the guy out. You know? Even if it's a pumpkin farm. At least the guy's trying to hang in there. Even if you have to pay a little bit more. Because this is the end result. And this right here is no good for bees at all. There's nothing there. There's nothing. This is another problem. This is your local town hall. I'm not picking on you people. I'm not really. I didn't come here to bash Bridgewater. Believe me. This is probably my local Abington. Look at that grass. Beautiful. You know how much herbicides had to be put on that to get that grass to look like that? And there's absolutely nothing for a bee to eat here. Zero. And we have all trained our eyes to make this thing look great. When I was a kid growing up, we had clover. As long as you kept it mowed, right? It wasn't so bad. Clover was a huge thing. Now we spend all this money on herbicides to get rid of the clover and the chickweed and all that stuff. The bees love it. This is a food desert to a bee. And the human eye is trained to say this thing looks beautiful. I don't know why. I don't know. Where did we go wrong? All the dough we're spending on this. And you're killing the honeybees. Let your lawn go and mow it. Well, save yourself a couple $100. All right. So the last thing, and I have to admit this was done by a beekeeper, so we're not all perfect either. Bees are regulated by the food industry. So, if you're going to move bees out of the state, there's a bee inspector that has to look at your bees to make sure they're not carrying any diseases. And you have to get a tag and you have to get permission. And I guess some people feel that they can do it. Excuse you. So some people feel like they can do this without permission. And right here, September 25th, 1987, a Florida beekeeper said, I need some more bees. And he went out of the country and illegally imported them. Thought he'd be kind of, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to go get some more bees, and I'm going to import them in here, and we're going to do it. And within a very short amount of time, look at this, September 25th to October 20th, about a month, 67 counties in Florida tested positive for this mite that came in on the bees because he didn't have it inspected. It's equivalent to a deer tick. I know everybody's aware of the deer tick. It is the bee's deer tick. It gets on their bee, it sucks their fluid out of them, and it leaves them very susceptible to diseases. And this is what what it looks like. They call it the Varroa Destructor. It is virtually in every single state in the United States now. It's the beekeeper's nightmare. And the only thing we've found so far that gets rid of it is a chemical. And what beekeeper do you think, if I'm standing up here, wants to use a chemical to kill a mite, a chemical that kills the bees? So that's one of the reasons why the 43% that I showed you. So this is what it looks like on a bee. Goes right in there, it sticks its little fangs in, feeds itself, and then reproduces. It's another thing that's wiping out bees all left and right, but we're working on that. The other parts you guys gotta work on. So, this is Dr. Marla Spivak. I finally put her name up here, I guess. She's a great scientist. And I wanna this is her analogy, and I wanna kind of give you the best way to give it to lay people about what would happen. So let's just say that you're at home, you had this chick that bit you, and you weren't feeling good. And you said, well, you know what really makes me feel good is Gatorade. I know Gatorade kind of got the little things in it that help me, so I'm going to go get some Gatorade. You find out, because of monoculture, the nearest store is 3 miles away. I said, well, what am I going to do? Same thing with the bees. The only thing I got here is almonds. You gotta go 3 miles to get something different. You walk down to the store 3 miles away and you buy yourself some Gatorade. And you drink down, well, I like green Gatorade. Anybody like green Gatorade? That's my favorite one. If I'm feeling kind of crappy, I drink green Gatorade. So you sit down on the sidewalk and you drink your Gatorade. And while you're taking your time, you pick up the label and you start looking and it says, this product may contain neonicotinoids. You go, crap. What did I just drink? Well, it's not going to do nothing to me. They said it wouldn't do anything to me. And you get up and you say, I got a 3-mile trek back to home. And you lose your mind. And you can't find your way home. And you walk right out in the woods and just perish. That was colony collapse disorder. The bees got bit by the tick, and the monoculture made them sick. They got the neonicotinoids, which wouldn't normally affect them. They lost their minds and they can't find their hives, and they went out in the woods and died. And every beekeeper found their hives empty. And that's what Marla Spivak thinks caused it. So we had to break these down one at a time and try and correct them. And how do we do that? Everybody's got to do their little part. Everybody. I know you can't start to make a farm. I can't start to make a farm. There's certain things we have to go along with here. But that's why I love talking to these plant organizations. Because everybody's going to go home and read their pesticide label, right? I know you are. And you're going to say, I remember Glenn saying, only spray at night. And how long does this pesticide last? And you're going to start looking around, and you're going to start asking questions. We're trying to get the big box stores to put a label on the front of the pesticides for the average person that says this product contains a neonicotinoid. We can't do it. Cliff is heavily involved in the State House. They will not do it. We're paying a lobbyist, I believe. And they can't get it past the Farm Bureau. Because they're using it. She says, why? Because they're using it. They don't want to go to the alternative. The alternative is to plant stuff that takes care of it, or to get out there and pick the worm off yourself. It hurts their production. So, all right, so what's the average? That's not the end of the world. Everybody's sitting, well, how come you brought this guy in? You know, I feel so bad I'm going to go home and throw up. Well, it's not the end. It's not the end. We're dealing with this, and we're going to get through this. So what do? You limit the use of pesticides. Herbicides are out. I'd rather see you set a bush on fire than use a herbicide. Okay? And then where you really need to use these pesticides, you use them by the label. Until we can get things changed, you read the directions, use them by the label, and more is not better. Less is better. Just because a tablespoon, they say a tablespoon, 2 doesn't make it better. Or kill more bugs. No, you're going to kill more bees. Okay? Plant bee-friendly flowers. And I apologize for not bringing a list. I have a list somewhere. I didn't know how many copies to make. I should have. Shame on me. Throw a tick on me or something. I don't know. Look them up. You can find them what the bees like. Just do a Google search. Flowers for honeybees. Try and buy all natural seeds if you're going to go into seeds, because I will tell you this also. The manufacturers are coating the seeds with neonicotinoids. So if you zero in and you do a Google search, there's people out there that will tell you we do not use anything on our seeds. But you have to be careful. So if you think you're going down, and I don't want to mention anybody's name, I'm not going to get into Burpee. I'm not going to say that name or something like that. And you go over to Walmart, because that's where I get them the cheapest. You want to look at the label. Because they found out when is it the most susceptible? When it first pops out of the ground. Right? And it's just starting to get those little leaves on it and stuff like that. Now it's when the caterpillar wants it. Well, guess what? Maybe the bee wants to be on there too. So they put it in the seed and the plant starts growing with it. Okay? So I'm not here to tell you all become beekeepers, because it's not for everybody. I want you to be bee friendly. And that's really what I want. That's why I love talking to groups like this. So remember, now, here's one of our president always says this. And remember when you were a kid, and my grandfather used to take me down this road going down to go fishing somewhere. And we'd have to stop halfway to clean the bugs off our windshield. How many people have cleaned the bug off their windshield? I can almost go all the way to Florida and maybe have 3 miles. We're killing all the insects. We're killing everything. Now, I wish I knew exactly how to just get the mosquito, but we don't. And we're killing everything. So here's where you guys come in. Here's a little picture of what it looks like from a beehive. Inside, looking out to the world. I always like this little picture because this is what the bees are seeing before they go out to collect their little harvest. And then if I could get I'm preaching to the choir here, but if I could get everybody in this room to do this, if we could get everybody in Bridgewater to plant one plant, I bet you half of our bee problem would go away. But there's so many yards with nothing. Nothing. So plant the plant. I know you guys go out there and get the word out, and kudos to you. Thank you. But that's what we want to do. A simple little... Yeah, she got it. I knew she would. Yep, Jack Manny. It's a simple little Jack Manny. They make spring, fall ones. So if you plant a couple different varieties, you're going to feed the bees, through the whole summer. Right now, our bees have nothing. There's nothing out there. Zero. Almost nothing.
Still have to watch you say.
Do you?
Been covered with butterflies and bees.
I'm surprised they're even flying now. Yeah, I still have some butterfly bush. There's a late bloomer now on a butterfly bush. I'm not a real plant, I have plants, but my forte is really bees. So, all right, so if we can all just get out there and plant something and use the pesticides the way they were intended to use and try not to use them, we're good to go. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have. Yes?
Now, do the manufacturers, the people, like any of the seed people or any of the plant people, do they have to have it on
No.
the label? They don't. So
No.
there you go.
So you have to really go searching. Now, one of the big ones that a lot of the guys around here, Cliff can testify, this is Johnny Seed. And I'm not advertising, but they're one, if you go onto their website, they will tell you that they don't use anything. Some of them, where they get cagey is they will avoid it. We'll get back to you. If you hear that, that means they got it.
Herbicide is like Roundup, right?
Yes. There's no good herbicide. It is indiscriminate, it kills everything. Yes.
Okay, how about the little homemade things that you, like Tabasco in there?
Yeah, that's cool.
And all of that is?
Yeah,
fine? Okay,
yeah.
so you-
Yeah, that's cool stuff.
And the soap?
Yeah, soap, because that's more of a direct repellent, you spray it right on there and then it dissipates. A lot of people use Dawn detergent for the caterpillars or something like that. And, you know, some people use vinegar, the bees are gonna smell it, they'll avoid it. It's the stuff that they don't know, and that's what the neonicotinoid was intended. And not only that, you're eating it later. You're eating it, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'd like to know what component is in honey that you buy in a grocery store that is not in the honey that you buy at a farm stand.
Okay, so here's the difference. I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to talk about honey. I'm not here to sell honey. But every time I go to a talk, everybody says, how many in your honey? So I bought some honey. It's $8 a bottle. Okay? I have a little squeeze ball out there with some little cups. You are more than welcome to go up there and taste it. I want you to taste it. The difference between store-bought honey and local honey is store-bought honey is pasteurized. They don't have to pasteurize it, but they do it for their safety purposes. You will never see store-bought honey. I'm talking like out of the big stores. It will never crystallize. In other words, the water starts separating from the sugar and you'll see the sugar get on the bottom. If that happens to our honey, all you have to do is heat it up a little bit, about 150, you don't want to get it boiling. So you want 110, 120 degrees, and just let it get warm. A lot of times if you keep it in the sun. And we do nothing to our honey but filter out the little bee pods that may get caught in. Okay, so we just use a fine metal filter and filter it too, so the pollen is in there, everything is in there. Now I know there are people that say pollen will help you. I'm not a doctor, I don't know if it does, but I can tell you that there are people that swear by it. They say if you take my doctor, I give my doctor honey every time I go in for a visit, and he almost prays to me. He says I do a teaspoon a day. I give him a 2-pound jar every time I go in. So there's an example of my doctor. He claims it's the best thing for you. I'll tell you right now, it's a proven fact, your liver does not break down white sugar. Your liver and white sugar do not get along. There's a chemical process that happens in there when white sugar is refined. I know it's made from a plant, but they strip all the good stuff away. They strip all the good stuff away, they cook it, they refine it down into a powder, and then they sell it to you. Your liver does not process white sugar. You won't have, I'm not even going to go there. My honey is not processed, and any one of our local beekeepers do not process their honey. Why would we do an extra step if we don't have to? The only thing I can tell you about this, and somebody mentioned to me this before, children under 1 year old, you don't want to give them honey.
Right.
And that is because they haven't built up the antibodies. More than likely, nothing would happen, but that's what they say. Do not give it to children under 1 until they build up their own antibodies. I'd say, hey, if you're a mother and you're breastfeeding, you take it. Your kid's going to get the antibodies. But that's the difference. So you will see this honey crystallize. But I'll guarantee you, if you have the time and you want to try it, you don't have to buy anything from me. There's a little squeeze bottle there, like a little squeeze ketchup bottle. Put it in a little cup and taste it. I think you'll be amazed. So if you've been buying it in the store, I think you're gonna be amazed.
Big difference, yeah.
And, yes,
Does the pasteurization process take the nutritious value out of it?
yes it does. Yes it does. But it's the same thing as like with the milk. There's plenty of people that drink raw cow milk. But to be on the safe side, if anybody got sick, they pasteurize milk. And there's the aficionados out of there that say that we're hurting the milk. There's a lot of stuff in the milk that we need that we're pasteurizing out, because I believe they have to bring it up to 150 degrees. They have to bring it up to 150 degrees and leave it there for a little while. I don't do anything to that. It comes with a little wax capping over it. I cut the wax capping off and spin it out in a centrifuge, put it through a metal filter, and it's yours. Good to go. Any other questions? Yes?
I just want to say that my family grew up on raw milk, and we are pretty healthy,
See, there you go.
and it was very good. It's not as good as, and it's better than store-bought.
Oh, yeah.
When we switched over, I went, ugh, this tastes terrible.
There you go. There you go.
Like water.
I'll bet you, honey, your family, your kids, we all grew up on raw honey. There was no other such thing.
We had raw honey.
Yeah.
We did.
So if you bought honey at one of these farm stands, that's a safe thing.
If you buy it and it has the beekeeper's label on it, like mine do, then it's raw honey, okay? Yeah, great on English muffins.
And the taste is so much better.
Oh, I
The
use
taste
it in,
of raw honey from a farm stand, and they'll always say local honey for you, is so different than the crap you buy in the stores. Half of it came from Mexico or Chile or,
oh, yeah, they're importing it from everywhere.
Botswana.
From everywhere.
And the difference is, it's just like the difference between cheesy ice cream and, and Haagen-Dazs. World of difference.
So I don't make any money off the honey. I mean, I hope, this is one of the big things with beekeeping too, if I could break even. If I could just sell the honey, because you have to leave, the bees around here, believe it or not, need about 100 pounds of honey to survive the summer. The winter. That's what they store. Now, anything over 100 pounds is what the beekeeper gets to take. Okay, so they get the majority of it. And if you take that away from them, you're not a very responsible beekeeper. So my thing is I personally don't even like doing honey. But the bees aren't going to consume it. It'll go to waste, anything over 100 pounds. So I do the bottling thing and I sell it. Hopefully it's going to pay for the equipment that I use. Anything else?
I'm curious.
Yes.
I have been to places that are selling natural honey, and they have all different flavors, and they're saying that, these bees, this one tastes, a certain flavor because it's, they pollinated from, the nectar's from certain plants. When you let a bee out of the hive, how can you tell which plant it's gonna go to?
A lot of beekeepers, what they try and do. Did everybody hear that question? Just me, how can you tell? So you go to a lot of, especially you'll see this in the stores. You'll see this in the big stores. They'll say, oh yeah, this is clover honey. Around here, forget it. Forget it. Bees travel about 3 miles, a 3-mile radius around the hive. You've got anywhere from, say, 30,000 bees in any given time going out 3 miles everywhere around that hive, and they're bringing it back and they're mixing it all together. So the only way you could say that a honey was a certain item was if you had 3 miles of clover and nothing else. Then probably get the EPA to come in and say, will you verify that there's nothing around this area but 3 miles of clover in every direction? And okay, now you've got clover honey.
Which was one of the things that you mentioned.
Yeah, so different times of the year what'll happen is like goldenrod. You can see and you can smell a goldenrod in the hive because it smells kind of stinky until the bees really work it over. What the bees do is, so nectar is 90% water. And what they do is they take the water out of it till it gets to about 18% water, and that's when it's honey. Now, the only reason why they make honey is because nectar won't store. It will ferment. Bees want nectar. They don't want honey. They want nectar, but it won't store. They could store nectar and they could figure out we'd have no honey. But they can't. It ferments. And they'd all be drinking wine or mead. And then you'd see all these bees going around in the winter like that. So they take all the water out of it so it won't ferment, and then they cap it over with wax, like putting a lid on a jar. And that's what they're doing with it. It's really not what they want. But they have no other way of storing it for the winter.
How do we get the water out?
They dry it. They actually put it in the cells and then they fan air by it till it dries. It's a long process. Yeah, it's a long process. Yeah, it's a long process. So the average bee in his lifespan makes about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. 1/12. So it took 12 for every teaspoon of honey that you take. Yeah.
What about organic honey that you buy in the market? Is there a difference between that and the regular honey that you get in there?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm just telling you this is all organic. There's nothing. I mean, other than the fact that I can't say the guy down the street that was planting squash might not have done it with organic material. So I guess that's another case of where if you wanted to say it was organic, you have to find out everything that's in that 3-mile area had nothing but organic material. So all the farmers were organic, everything was organic, and nobody was using commercial, fertilizers or anything else. That's the only way you could. The only places I even know of something like that is like Peru or Chile or something like that. They do have some wide open areas, and then their government says, "Oh yeah, this is organic."
Glenn? On the organic honey, there is no such thing as organic honey anywhere in the continental United States, probably. So if somebody locally is trying to sell you organic honey, it isn't. They're lying to you. But if you go to BJ's, you'll see organic honey there, and if you look at the label, it's because it came from Brazil.
Okay, Brazil, there's another one, yeah. But then you do you trust their government? I mean, if they're gonna get $5 more for a bottle of organic honey, then they're gonna say, yeah, go for it. We'll say it's organic.
Well, plus it doesn't have it's not gonna have the same taste. It doesn't, I know somebody that bought some of that, and they also had my honey, and there was just no even though it was organic from Brazil, it just didn't taste anywhere near as good.
Taste this stuff up here. Now all of my honey comes out of either Whitman or Carver. I have hives in Carver, okay? And I mix them together. They're all mixed, so when I do my extracting, I extract them all, and what comes out of the bottle comes out of the bottle. Think of it like, what do they call it? Blended Scotch whiskey.
Sounds good.
Ooh, I don't like the malt stuff anyhow. I like the blended. That's blended up, dry. And then just give it a little whirl, and you're going to go looking for it. There are places around here that have it. I'm pretty sure that Peaceful Meadows has it. I'm sure there's a couple small little stores around here. Some of the beekeepers in our group go around to the little stores. Some of the states are getting kind of tough. They're getting starting to put restrictions on. Yes, that girl is in our club. That's Celeste.
I have to give
Yep.
you a Christmas gift.
Yep, she's very nice. Celeste is very nice. She's got a lot of hives over there at Stan Smith.
They went to school, right?
Yep, she's very nice.
Now,
Yes?
I have sedum, which I think everybody in the place can verify is a very strong attraction for bees.
What is it?
Sedum.
Sedum.
S-E-D-U-M.
Sedums.
And, but most of the time, it's the bumblebees. I don't really see that many.
Well, when is it blooming?
Oh, it's still going now.
Well, you won't see honeybees now. I mean, very rare, unless the day gets up to 60, you're not gonna see them.
Yeah.
So that's the thing with that. I mean, I don't know when that blooms, so,
But I mean, it's the big puffy bees, which are the bumblebees.
you're right, but they're out right now. Yeah, they're out right now. Our bees are not.
Where, do they make honey? bumblebees?
Oh, yes. Yeah, but they don't store it like bees. Because they don't have to live the winter, because the bumblebee does not live the winter, and the pack doesn't live the winter, they don't need to store the honey. Like, our bees are only storing it so they survive the winter. They need 100 pounds. The bumblebee goes and she buries herself, and everybody else
Right,
dies.
but what do they do with the honey that they make?
It's consuming to make as many bees as she can make during the summer months.
Oh, okay.
All right? So it's not anywhere near like what a honeybee does. No.
Okay.
Yeah. No other questions about honey or anything like that, huh?
No, thank you very much, this was very informative.
It is true that honey never goes bad, because one of the big things, that's a nice question too. One of the things that they used to find in the pharaohs love to bring it into their tombs, and they opened up the bottles, and the honey was just as good. That was a big thing with the Egyptians, was honey.
You don't
Again, they had honey hunters. I'm sorry?
You don't refrigerate it.
No, I would, well, it won't hurt to refrigerate it. The problem is, once it goes much below room temperature, it's 65 or so, it starts to crystallize. The water will start. Okay, so you want to bring it up to like 140 degrees, maybe 130 degrees. Actually, they say about 110 degrees, but it'll take 48 hours. And then you just keep rotating it back, and the sugar will mix right back in with it.
So, what would you do then? Put the jar in some boiling water and turn it
What I do is, you take a pan of water, and you get it so that you're barely seeing the little bubbles. Not really boiling, barely seeing the bubbles. And then I put the jar in there. And every once in a while I go and I just give it like this, and eventually it's right back to where it was. The best, you know what the best thing to do is? On a good summer day, put it on the dash of your car. I mean, that way you're not using any electricity either.
Try to keep it under 120, in other
Yeah,
words.
but 120 is fine. Thanks.
You don't put it in the microwave.
No, you want to kill all the magic.
That's bad.
Kill the magic.
Yes.
I did, the house next door to us sold, and on the corner of the house, the Honeybees, the wood is.
Yep, the corner board,
All
yep.
brought it out,
Uh-huh,
and they had honeybees
Uh-huh.
in the house. Well, I didn't find this out until afterwards. And they hired
mm-hmm,
someone to
Yeah,
exterminate them.
yeah. Well, they can't exterminate, by law, they're not supposed to exterminate. So if you get bees in your house, it's against the law for an exterminator to go in and kill them. This is honeybees now. So he's supposed to go in there and look at them, and if they're honeybees, he's supposed to go get somebody that can take them out for you. He's not supposed to use a
You
chemical.
don't want to waste them.
Yes.
They were honeybees because.
Yeah,
the
well,
neighbor across the
okay,
street
you know,
used to
kinda
run
like-
mine.
Can we get some lights? Are there lights here? Kind of like out of sight, out of mind, you know, I mean, kind of thing, but they're not supposed to do that. It's the same thing as like, you know, the guys that come down and spray for mosquitoes.
Yeah.
There's certain things they're not supposed to do, but if you pay him and he's out there going like this, and his beehive's right over there, and you have to turn him in. You have to turn him in. Somebody's got to turn him in. Yes.
You said, you suggested like a teaspoon of honey a day.
Ah.
If you mix that like in a cup of hot tea, would it be
Yeah, well-
beneficial, or is it just straight?
Okay, so one way to look at this is you may be killing some of the properties of the honey with the hot tea, but it's much better than sugar. It's much better for you than sugar. I would really recommend that you don't overheat the honey, because that's when you start ruining a lot of the properties in it. But versus sugar, absolutely positively use the honey.
Once the tea's cooled off to the point where you can drink it, you could probably put it in
Yeah,
without
it's
it,
probably 120 degrees or so. Yeah.
or less, yeah.
So everybody try that honey. Just go up here and do a little dab. It's free. Try it. If you want to buy some, I have.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Let So pick up a grandchild.
He did say $8, didn't he, for John?
I think so, yeah.
How much did he say? Okay.
That's a good price too, by the way, because this is a pound. $8 is a really good price. He's giving you guys a good deal. We sell the same bottle of honey for $12 at the Marshfield Fair.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, so that's the half pound, he's giving it to you for the half pound price.